In the federal courts, at the legislature, and inside state agencies, a war is being fought over water. Even though Oklahoma's economy is dependent on good water supplies, there is little agreement on how the precious resource should be managed for now and into the future.
First, some water facts. Our state has nearly 56,000 miles of shoreline, 1,401 square miles of water area in Oklahoma lakes and ponds, approximately 167,000 miles of rivers and streams, and every year evaporation from Oklahoma lakes ranges from 48 to 65 inches, more than most of the state's annual yearly rainfall. There is concern that parts of the state could run short in the years ahead.
We have more than enough water in Oklahoma to meet our long-term water needs for the next 50 years and beyond through both groundwater supply and surface water supply. The problem is, and always has been, the water's not exactly where you need it to meet that demand.
And that's where the battles over water begin. Transferring water has been done to some degree, but it has never been done to the extent that agriculture producers would like, at least in western Oklahoma. Mike Spradling is president of the Oklahoma Farm Bureau. He says major water transfers would have already occurred if it were not for the costs involved, transfers like he recently saw on a fact-finding trip to Israel.
But they have a pipeline going all through Israel, and they send that water out to be used for agriculture, just specifically for agriculture uses.
Spradling says those water pipelines turn deserts into fertile fields, and parts of Oklahoma need the same kind of access to water.
There's things like that, we need to be thinking about, and of course they're doing it out of necessity, and I hope that we do something about our situation with water before it becomes an absolute necessity, a matter of survival.
Another skirmish in the water war was fought in the state legislature. At the beginning of the session, there were numerous bills involving water, but only a handful survived. Water stakeholders grade performance of lawmakers based largely on individual water needs. State Representative Brian Renninger gives his colleagues a failing grade.
Probably about an F-. We did not get in legislation approved to create the regional water groups. Besides not getting that done, we only actually passed 2 pieces of legislation out of 8 recommendations.
J.D. Strong, executive director of the Water Resources Board, gives lawmakers a different grade, and he agrees with Representative Renninger on the need for regional water councils.
I actually would say A. I would say I would go all the way A+ if it weren't for one measure that we wanted to see pass that did not.
Strong says creation of those regional water councils is a critical component of future water planning.
It was the most recommended issue in the comprehensive water plan in terms of the public input process. The public made a number of recommendations, more of those recommendations than any other, focused on this regional planning group concept.
Jim Rodriguez heads the Oklahoma Aggregates Association, 43 different companies that mine granite, limestone, and sand, an industry that needs a lot of water.
As far as this last legislative session is concerned, how would you grade it as it pertains to your industry and in particular to water?
I think the legislature again scores high. I would give it at least a B.
But the mining industry wants no part of regional water councils.
We saw no need for establishing this new bureaucracy. For some of our members who operate in multiple locations throughout the state, they would end up having, several new government jurisdictions that they would have to monitor.
For Mike Spradling at the Farm Bureau, the lawmakers earn an average grade.
I'd have to say it'd probably, being conservative, maybe a C on that.
He'd give them an A for being cautious, but a letter grade of D for not getting much done. Spradling says there is a benefit to taking this issue slowly because understanding all of the science and unique individual demands involving water takes time to really understand. The number one use of Oklahoma water is for public water supplies. Each year, 10.5 million acre-feet of water flow into the state, but 36 million acre-feet flow out. 1 inch of rain on a 160-acre field delivers over 4 million gallons of water, about 13.3 acre-feet. Oklahoma City, state government, and the Chickasaw and Choctaw Nations are facing off in federal court over Sardis Lake. A special task force is meeting in secret to come up with a solution. That case has Oklahoma's agriculture community really concerned.
If the tribes were to be successful in their lawsuit against the state of Oklahoma, there could be as many as 30-some different agencies controlling water and environmental issues in the state of Oklahoma.
In a matter of weeks, teams of lawyers from Oklahoma will meet with the U.S. Solicitor General over the appeal of the Tarrant Regional Water District lawsuit that is attempting to force Oklahoma to sell water to Texas.
We're going to tell them why we don't think the Supreme Court needs to take this issue up.
There is also growing pressure from municipalities for water, eyeing the ample supplies of eastern Oklahoma. Tourism and recreation forces are pushing back, fearing their precious resource could be wiped out.
When we talk about southeast Oklahoma water coming to central Oklahoma to meet its long-term needs, but people fail to recognize that we have a law and a process that requires us to protect the long-term needs of in-basin users and making sure that their long-term water needs are well taken care of into the foreseeable future before we can allow one drop of water to be transferred out.
At the Farm Bureau, there is another major battleground involving water: landowner rights.
We feel that the groundwater is a private property right of the member. The person that buys the surface has title to it. We feel has title to the groundwater.
But for farmers to use groundwater, they have to get a permit from the Water Resources Board and are limited in how much they can actually use.
It's something that we're just probably going to end up having to deal with. But still, again, it's a basic right that we feel was a private property right. But we're losing some of that based upon the I guess pressures of the legislature, pressures of society as a whole when it comes to water.
There is no disagreement on one thing: the state's water infrastructure needs work. The Comprehensive Water Plan puts a price tag of nearly $82 billion on that. J.D. Strong says lawmakers addressed the issue by placing on the November ballot a constitutional amendment that would expand his agency's bonding capacity.
We have financed nearly 70% of the infrastructure that's gone in across the state of Oklahoma over the past almost 30 years, but we've only done $2.6 billion worth of financing through those programs. Looking at this $82 billion price tag over the next 50 years is quite daunting.
So OWRB is now one of the biggest banks in Oklahoma?
We don't make payday loans around here. We make really solid loans to communities and rural water districts across the state, and we have a lot of backing for those loans, and we believe just increasing the leveraging capacity through essentially a pledge of credit of the state will allow us to accomplish the financing needs over the next 50 years without a bond issue, without an appropriation, without increased taxes.
The legislature also approved a bill providing new funds for the Water Resources Board and the Conservation Commission to pay for a groundwater monitoring program.
So when folks talk about concerns with fracking and whether or not it's polluting our aquifers, whether or not drawdowns are occurring in certain aquifers of the state, we'll be able to, for the first time ever, comprehensively monitor those issues and tell folks if it's really causing any problems.
Mining, energy, cities and towns, farmers, ranchers, landowners, lawsuits, and legislators. The water war is being fought by people on many fronts, but one fact remains undeniable.
We'll definitely face another Dust Bowl type situation if we just try to stand still and don't address these issues, that's for sure.
Bob Sands produced this story. Bob, is the state making any improved effort at gathering the scientific data necessary to make good water policy?
Well, one of the keys there is that the Water Board one of the few agencies that actually got extra money for the next fiscal year, specifically for the very first time in state history, to actually begin monitoring groundwater. That way they can determine, are the aquifers being depleted? Are we taking too much out? Is it being polluted in some way? And that is a real key to one of the most important elements of water policy.
What is the biggest issue still facing Oklahoma water policymakers?
And that's a question that if you asked 15 different people, you probably get 15 different answers. But the truth is, probably the most important issue is the vote that's going to be in November, during the November elections, on a proposed constitutional amendment that would actually allow the Water Resources Board to actually raise the money necessary to start doing something about the water infrastructure. Now, that's only pertaining to drinking water and wastewater. The issue of building reservoirs still remains to be resolved. The issue of excess water, surplus water, how that works out, all issues that have yet to be resolved, and in fact are probably going to take quite some time to get figured out. But nonetheless, the very first step is to come up with the money to start rebuilding the state's infrastructure, which is now approaching 60 years in age for most of it.
Bob Sands, thanks for that report on this continuing story.
You bet.